Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. This is your host, Mariana speaking, and thank you for tuning in to the Commitment to Growth podcast today. Welcome back for another episode. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new, welcome back. In any case, lovely to have you as always. I hope this episode finds you well. I hope you're having a wonderful week. I hope you're treating yourself well today and every single day. Hope you're practicing some self compassion, some acknowledgement of your progress and the efforts that you're putting in. And if you haven't quite reached the milestones that you were hoping to reach this week, remember that sometimes rejection is redirection, and you may just have to assess your game plan a little bit further to see where you're lacking and get yourself right back onto the path. Remember that redirection does not mean that you should completely restart. It might just mean amending some things, and there is always opportunity to do that at any time, any day. So, just wanted to throw in some words of motivation. I know that this time in the year can feel like it is stretched out for so long in October, and I guess all of the months in the second half of the year can feel like they're stretching out forever. So, just hoping that you're showing yourself a little bit of self compassion and taking it slow where you can, when you can, and keeping yourself in check because that is what is most important to ensure success ultimately. So, anyways, hope you're doing well. I have a super exciting podcast episode to share with you today. And I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. This episode is featuring the wonderful, the powerhouse, the superwoman, Chaix McDonough. And let me just say that as an aspiring life coach, yes, it is on my bucket list for at some point in my life. Hearing this perspective was so incredible and so valuable. And after this episode, I have so much gratitude and so much respect for everything that Lee is doing in the life coach community and how she is transforming life coaching and what life coaching means. So, if you are an aspiring life coach like myself, or if you are in any sort of leadership position where you are responsible for managing people, leading people, giving directions, having one on ones, mentoring, this episode is for you because Lee just dropped so many gold nuggets and she spoke so much truth and she gave a very insightful outlook into the role of a leader and the important things that you need to have as a leader to lead others and what qualities you have to cultivate in yourself before putting yourself in a position of leadership. So, I hope you're ready. This was such an awesome conversation. To tell you a little bit about Lee, other than all the amazing gems I just told you about, Lee is the founder of Coach with Clarity, which is a training and education company for life and business coaches. She is also the host of the Coach with Clarity podcast and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Act on Your Business, Braving the Storms of Entrepreneurship and Creating Success Through Meaning, Mindset, and Mindfulness. And we talk about those 3 M's in this episode as well. Lee is passionate about helping coaches and clients achieve their personal and professional dreams, which she does through her training programs and one-on-one services. Lee's empathetic nature and desire to truly connect with people help her stand out from the crowd and allowing her clients and students to feel deeply seen and heard. You are not just a face in the crowd when you are working with Lee, and you are not just a face in the crowd after this conversation, let me tell you. So, Lee is going to tell you all about what she does in her business, how she's helping coaches approach coaching in a new light and making coaching way more intuitive, way more personal, and way more two-sided for the coach and the client because not only clients walk away having gained something from a coaching session. So, with all that being said, I hope I have hyped you up as hyped as I was before this conversation and afterwards. And without further ado, here is Chaix McDonough, everybody. We are joined today by Lee, everybody. Lee, say hi. How's it going?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much.
I am super excited to have you here because we have a superwoman in the house today, everybody. And I cannot wait to introduce yourself. So why don't you go ahead and do that so everybody knows who you are and what you do?
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing over here. Um, so it's such an honor to be on your show. Thanks for having me. My name is McDonough. I'm the founder of Coach with Clarity, where we support innovative, intuitive helping professionals as they transition into the world of coaching. So there's a lot that goes into that, the business of coaching, the actual craft or art of coaching. And so we pretty much cover it all. And that's also something that I talk about on my own podcast, the Coach with Clarity podcast.
Oh my gosh, so well-rounded. I absolutely love that. I want to know what led you to establish something, your business that approached coaching from more than just the business aspect, from the intuition and the mindfulness realms. Like, did you have your own experience with that, or what inspired that for you?
I think I really credit my background as a psychotherapist. So I spent over
Mm,
15 years as a therapist and public health professional before I went into the world of coaching.
okay.
And actually, part of the reason I transitioned into coaching from therapy was because I found it
Mhm.
was a more, what's the word I want to use? It was a place where I could bring my whole self to my work. So
Mm,
that included my intuition and my wisdom, as well as evidence-based practice. And I think sometimes, for better or for worse in mental health, we really focus on, the tried and true methods, following the medical model. There's not
mhm.
always room to bring intuition and spirituality and growth
Yeah,
in.
of course.
Whereas in coaching, there's just so much freedom. And so I really valued that about the profession. And interestingly, the more I worked with my one-on-one clients, many of whom were therapists themselves, the more they started asking me, tell me about this coaching thing. How did you become a coach? Can you help me become a coach?
Mm,
And that's really when
mhm.
I kind of pivoted into the training and education side of the house.
Yeah.
And that's my love. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Oh, that's so amazing. And I think that's such a unique shift into something that I guess is largely clinical, which and has a lot of value in its own sense, of course.
Absolutely.
But I think coaching is very cool in that sense because you're bringing something that is more personal and more authentic to you as it pertains to how you're using your own story to help individuals, right? Or your own experiences. I think therapy can be a bit limited in that sense just because it is much more about the individual. So, given that experience, let's kind of like get a little bit general here. How do you define a successful coach and what traits a successful coach has to have to lead
Yes.
others?
Yes. So when we talk about coaches or coaching, I want to acknowledge that there are a lot of different definitions and approaches to it, and
Mm,
all have their own merit. The way I view coaching is that it's a dynamic, client-centered, co-creative partnership that empowers our
mm,
clients to really define and explore and embody the fullest expression of themselves. So, a coach that is centering the client's agenda, who understands not just what the client wants to achieve, but why it matters to them. That's really
mm,
important as well. Who defers to the client and understands that the client is the expert in the client, but the coach is the expert in facilitating the process to encourage growth, to allow the client to develop insights and then ultimately take action. And so there's a bit of a
mm,
dance that we do as coaches
mm,
where we allow the client to lead and we're more the guide. But because we're the guide, we know how to create the structure and the boundaries in order to maximize the client's likelihood of success.
okay, I see. That was so awesome. I love that. And
Oh, thanks.
I love that you say co-creative because it really is a product of teamwork, right? Like
Absolutely.
there's this going back and forth. There is this very organic relationship that you have to build and conversation that you have to get to the root of the why, as you mentioned. So that being said, what is how does a coach develop that kind of leadership to hold that space while still and co-create while still being somebody that a client looks up to per se?
I think you have just really hit the nail on the head with what we are continuing to work on as coaches. Like that's
Mm,
really more about the process of growing as a coach. And I'm not
mm-hmm,
sure we ever hit the I hope we don't ever hit the point actually where we've mastered that because there's always more to learn and
mm,
grow.
yeah.
Um, but what I would say is that in order to show up in a place of compassion and partnership and co-creation with our clients,
Mhm.
we really do need to be willing to give that to ourselves first. So, outside of the coaching room, how are we encouraging our own creativity? How are we tapping into our own
Mm.
intuition? How are we not just identifying our values or what matters most to us, but how are we living them out? So, I think successful
Mm.
coaches are walking the talk, and then they know when and how to use their experiences to support their clients. And that's a piece that takes a lot of practice too. How do we center the client? How do we keep their story and their agenda at the forefront while
Mhm.
also sharing the wisdom and experiences that we've had that can serve them? So I do think there's a
Mhm.
bit of a dance there, but for me it really always comes down to what does the client want from today's session? What does the client want from the relationship as a whole? And how can I best show up and serve this client right in front of me? And what about my approach or my style might I have to adapt a bit in order to meet the client where they are? And then what about me
Mm.
am I going to hold firm to model what's possible for my client? So
Oh,
there's a
wow.
lot of both and when it comes to
Of
coaching, not just either
course.
or, but creating
Yeah.
space for all of it.
Of course. And it's so important because I find that as we were talking about, there's a there's a very sacred space between you being a leader, but also showing up at the same playing field as the client so that it is not this kind of, you know, overarching power dynamic. It's
Yes.
a oneness that allows you to build and allows you to show up for each other and see each other wholly in that way. So, and that can only happen if you do that work first yourself, right?
That's so
So,
true. And that's
mhm,
ultimately one of the reasons why I transitioned from therapy into coaching. Because
mhm,
and I want to be
mhm.
clear, as a
Yeah,
therapist myself, and I know a lot of therapists out there who want that equal partnership, that co-creative relationship in the
yeah,
therapy room. And I
for
think
sure.
sometimes it's possible. But also, I think because of the medical model, because of the way we've set up our healthcare systems, there is
Mhm,
an inherent power imbalance in a therapist client relationship. The therapist
mhm,
has the degrees, the license, that they diagnose, they treat. And even when they try to create that equal partnership, just the environment we're in almost doesn't allow for that. And so that's why I really appreciate the space that coaching creates because it does allow for that equality and that give and take.
mhm.
And so I'd love to see a world where we can really embrace that in the mental health realm as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
we got to work with what we have, and so I really appreciate the flexibility then that coaching provides, both for me as the coach, but also for my clients as well. And it
Of
allows
course.
me to show up as my full self. I don't have to worry about not disclosing personal aspects. I mean, oh my gosh, that was drilled into me when I was in school. Like, the therapist
Mm,
is the blank slate. We don't share too much. If we share, we have to be really cautious and careful. And I think we're moving away
mhm.
from that a bit, at least I hope we are. But I do feel like I can be more transparent and therefore more authentic with my clients in a coaching setting.
Totally. Totally. I love that point that you brought up there about being the blank slate. And I think that that happens outside of therapy, even as, maybe like the therapist friend or the glue of the family or something, right? But I think it's so unhealthy because especially in a room where there is that space between the therapist and the attendee, it creates this implicit, maybe like even unconscious notion in the attendee, the client, that, oh, well, this person has mastered it, right? This
Yes,
person is perfect. This person doesn't feel pain. This person can manage difficult emotions. And it's like, no, you know? And for people to subconsciously set that standard because it's what's being, indirectly relayed to them by the therapist not disclosing things, it creates a super unrealistic toxic standard that I think we're all coming to realize that is not the case. It's not about getting to this place where you have overcome everything and surpassed everything. It's about integration is the word that I've been using a
absolutely.
lot recently.
I love that. I love
Mm-hmm.
that. I agree 100%. And I think it does not serve anyone to place a provider on a pedestal, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, a physician, a coach. Like, that does not help the client because it creates distance and it makes the client feel like they're not good enough, or there's still more to aspire to. But then
Mhm.
there's also a lot of pressure for the person on the pedestal who feels like they have to be perfect. They have to be this
Yeah,
ideal representation, that
of
they can't
course.
stumble or make mistakes. And that's a heavy burden to carry as well. And so
Mhm.
a lot of times, when I think about the relationships we want to create in coaching, it's easy when we're looking at a relationship that has a power imbalance to think someone is on that pedestal and someone is below. And so we
Mhm.
can envision a ladder where someone's a few rungs higher. In coaching, we flip that 90 degrees. So it's not that someone's higher, it's just that they're a little further on the path, but we're on the same level. And so as a
Mm. Oh, I
coach, that's
love
how I
that.
view my role. I might have a few more years experience in a given area. Maybe I've had some insight or some growth. It doesn't mean that I'm better than any of my clients. It just means I'm at a different point. And I
Mhm.
can use that then to turn around and clear the path behind me for the people who are coming up and ensure that they have what they need to get there as well.
I love the concept of flipping it 90 degrees. That's stunning. And I think that's such a brilliant way of describing it because yeah, we are all on the same playing field and it's not necessarily that it's a race. It's just that like you said, one person might have a more experienced toolkit in one area or a diverse set of skills in a particular area, but there is that room to catch up to them if you are willing to see each other eye to eye, you know. I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask
Absolutely.
you as it pertains to that work and creating that space of oneness between the client, how do you coach yourself to get to a place where you can hold that space?
Oh, that is a fantastic question.
Thank
Because I
you.
think about when I was a young therapist, and that was not something that I was particularly adept at doing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I remember one of my earliest jobs, I worked part time at an inpatient psychiatric hospital for children.
Okay.
And it was very hard for me to leave work at work. It felt like I was taking these children home with me every night. Not
Mm-hmm.
literally, of course, but they were certainly taking up space in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really didn't serve anyone because I found myself getting overly emotionally invested in my client's welfare to the point where I was kind of losing myself in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a tough lesson, but a necessary lesson that I needed
Yeah.
in my 20s. So that now, later in my career as a therapist and now in my career as a coach, it's very much about how to create that relationship where I do care very deeply about my clients and I want them to be happy and healthy and I want them to succeed. And I understand where my ownership of their wants and their goals ends and where they need to pick it up and run with it. And so we talk a lot about boundaries in the coaching certification program I run. I also talk about it with my clients as well. So we're all
Mm-hmm.
clear on what my role is and how I support you and how I can be there for you, but I can't do it for you. And ultimately, that's where you've
Mm-hmm.
got to take the baton
Oh
and move
yeah.
forward. So setting that kind of boundary from the beginning, I think is really important to create that space where you can show up and be a really effective coach for your people.
Of course, of course. I love that you said that because that's right in my own ideology. I get asked all the time, like, why do you want to be a doctor? That's kind of the profession that
Mhm.
I'm going for right now. And the answer that I always give is I want to teach people how to take ownership of their lives to a point where, maybe at the beginning stages, I am holding them by the hand and kind of introducing them to this new world of, being there for yourself by yourself sometimes. But how do we train people to take on the world by themselves rather than just throwing them into it, right? And that pertains more than just to health, right? It pertains to coaching, it pertains to teaching in elementary schools and high schools. Any profession where there is that leadership role, it's such a fine dance between being a role model and somebody who is giving people the tools to walk out into the world and take it on, rather than giving them a formula to apply and expect it to work. It's how do you train them to how do you train them to develop their own formula? And I love that you said that because it's such a, like, even in that therapist relationship, I can imagine is such a fine dance.
It is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because as you were sharing that, I was thinking it's so applicable outside of business as well. Like I'm using it as a
Mhm.
parent. I have two
Mm.
teenage boys, and the idea of trying to empower them to make decisions for themselves and decide who they want to be, how they want to
Mhm.
operate in the world. And when they're younger, of course, as a parent, you're more involved and you do take more of the responsibility because little kids need you to. But
Yeah,
as they get older and as they move into adolescence, we have to be willing to let go of that a bit so that they can shine. And
totally.
so that's very much an idea that right now in my life I'm feeling personally and professionally. Because when we
Mm.
try to do too much for people, whether it's our clients, whether it's our friends, whether it's our children or our parents, we run the risk of disempowering them. And actually, we may even enable them to think, I can't do this on my own. I have to have help. I have to have someone else do it for me, instead of
Yeah.
showing them what's possible and that no, you really can step up and do this. You have what it takes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I I'm definitely looking forward to that aspect of being a parent one day for sure. Because I see it even in, and bless my mother, I see it this in her all the time too. Like she'll offer to make my, I don't know, my doctor's appointments for me or something. I'm like, no, like I got it, but I also recognize that it comes from a place of love. So, but it is a finance.
Absolutely.
It is a
Yes.
finance.
The hard
Yeah.
part too is allowing the people that we care about to fail safely, to
Mm,
make mistakes.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, with my kids, this is not checking their homework, not checking, saying, okay, you got a test tomorrow, you better study, but I'm not standing
Yeah.
over them, making sure they do it. Like they have to learn how to do these things on their own, and they have to make mistakes if they don't do it, because that's how we learn.
Yeah.
And I think in
Absolutely.
coaching, the same is true. Honestly, I think a lot of my clients do come to me at first because they're like, okay, Lee, you know what you're doing. Tell me what to do. They want the how to, they want the formula, they want the guide. And
Mhm.
again, for me, a client centered approach means meeting them where they are, but it doesn't necessarily mean giving them everything they want. Because the way I've done something
Mhm.
worked for me, but it might not work for them.
Yeah.
So, how can we kind of gently massage that question so it's less about me imparting my endless wisdom for you and more about helping you tap into your own so that you start to
Mm.
develop the solutions to your own challenges? You start to come up with the answers to your own questions. Of course, I'm here to provide insight and guidance when appropriate, to maybe open up other opportunities for growth, but I'm not here to tell you what to do. And I think that might be one myth of coaching, that coaches come in and tell you what to do. And
Mhm.
I would say if a coach is doing that, they're probably very early in their journey. And that's okay. We all
Mhm.
got to start somewhere.
Mhm.
But ideally, if a coach is doing most of the talking in a session, then something's gone horribly wrong. And we need to really defer to the client and their wisdom and then come in and support them when they need it and when they ask for it.
Interesting. How do you build that ability to meet a client where they are by coaching yourself per se?
Yes. Well, so a lot of times I find in session, there's some internal self coaching that's going on. So
In the coach or
yes,
okay,
absolutely. And that's
awesome.
the tricky thing about being a coach is you do need to give your full attention to your client while also being aware of what's going on within you. So if a
Mhm.
client is asking me a question, I'm paying attention to their verbal cues, their nonverbal cues, the hints of what's underneath the question. What might we need to unpack? And I'm also noticing if it's bringing up anything in me. Is their question something that I've asked myself? Is this issue that we're exploring one that's relevant for me? And I'm making note of my own responses. And in the moment, trying to figure out, okay, what of this is my stuff that I need to deal with later?
Mhm.
And what of this is relevant for the client here in the moment? And
Yeah,
so it's almost like having to keep an eye on what's in front of you, but also checking your rear view mirror, in this case, your internal mirror, to see, all right, what's coming up for me and how do I need to be aware of this?
totally. It's kind of like the friend that you go to for advice, but then it ends up being about them or something that
Oh yeah.
happens. And I mean that in the best way, right? Like there are times where that pain resurfaces and we don't even realize that we're talking about it anymore or processing it out loud. But that's an incredibly big part of self-awareness, I think, is realizing when you are projecting your own fears and, negative thought patterns and insecurities onto somebody else when they came to you about something about them.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a very fine dance, and this is making me want to become a coach now, because I just think that's so that's a brilliant internal clock to have, I think. um how do you coach yourself at home? Like, what does your intuition mindfulness practice look like that prepares you to show up for your clients in your workplace?
Yes. So there are a few things that I do. I think number one, though, and this I just want to say
Mm-hmm.
is something that I continue to practice. I was trained in an approach called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, in 2009 when I was working for the US Department of Veterans Affairs.
Okay.
And really, I feel like my life was before ACT and after ACT, because the principles of
Mm,
ACT are just life changing. And although it was initially developed as a therapeutic modality, the tenets within it are universally applicable. It's what I talk about in my book. It's what I teach in my program. It's all about understanding the three M's, meaning, mindset, and mindfulness, and how
mm,
you can harness them to live a fulfilling life. And so mindset work is in there. That's very much looking at how we relate to our internal experiences, our thoughts, our
mm,
feelings, our emotions, our memories, our sensations, all of that. And so a lot of the coaching work I do for myself before I go into session has to do with, all right, what's going on? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And then creating space for all of those, not trying to, shut any emotions down, or say that there's thoughts that I'm not allowed to have. Like, they're there. The question then
mm,
is, to what extent do I want those thoughts and feelings driving my decisions and informing
mm.
my actions? And
Yeah.
so that's where just
Oh,
pausing and reflecting, being really compassionate and understanding that whatever you're experiencing is likely a normal response to whatever's going on right now. And then from there, deciding, okay, I can hold this thought, I can hold this feeling, but how do I want to move forward? And that's where connecting with the M of meaning can be really helpful, because meaning is all about getting clear on what matters most to you. What are your core values? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? What do you want to be known for? Like, these
mhm,
are like those big, like broad, encompassing values that shape who we are, so that
mhm,
when we start to get carried away by unwanted thoughts or unwanted feelings, we can ground ourselves back down in our values, because our values become the compass and can show us what direction to take. And all of that
mhm,
weaves in with the third M of mindfulness, because when we're practicing mindfulness,
mhm,
really all that is present moment awareness. And it's that awareness of what's going on inside. How is that influencing what wants to happen outside? And in this mindful moment, what decision do I want to make? So they all weave together.
mm.
And so I use that in my personal practice every day. And it's also hopefully something I'm able to share with my clients and my students as well.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I've got goosebumps just listening to that. I think that's so stunning. And I find, first of all, thank you. That was amazing. And I'm gonna be walking around with that tattooed on my arm or something. But I swear, after this, I'm gonna go get it. But um, I think that is such an important way of looking at even just basic human connection. And it goes back to the idea that we were mentioning earlier about co-creation and co-creating that experience between the client and the coach, right? It's understanding that even as the coach, and I guess technically the person facilitating the session, that client is going to bring up stuff in you. And that is why it's co-creating, because when you are probed, you have the choice to make of, do I respond impulsively based on those emotions, or can I reflect on them later and put them aside for now? It's understanding that although you are being the coach in that situation, that client, because they probed something in you by virtue of that, they now just coached you as well, right? That's
Yes,
such a
yes.
stunning way to look at that relationship. I love that.
And I learned so much from my clients. And some of
Mhm.
my greatest aha moments have come in session with my clients.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so
Yeah.
it really is this beautiful act of reciprocity. And they give me a gift as well. So I mean,
Mm,
I love it. I love everything about coaching. And when done
yeah.
well, it benefits everyone. It benefits the client, it benefits the coach, it benefits our communities. And that's why
Mhm.
I believe in the power of coaching to change the world. And it starts just with this one little ripple, just this one little pebble in the
Yeah.
water, but it just can have that ripple effect and impact hundreds, thousands, millions, really.
Completely, completely. I don't think that we ever recognize the the extent to which those aha moments and those learnings then play into our later regular conversations. I
Mhm.
love that. I completely agree. How does intuition play a part in your role as a coach?
Yes. So I strongly believe that every single one of us has been given the gift of intuition. Some
Mm-hmm.
of us may be more attuned to it or aware of how it shows up. And so the first step is to really understand, how does your intuition show up for you? For some people, it's
Mm-hmm.
a sensation in their body. For other people, they may literally see or hear a word kind of in their minds. Other people might see images or sense energies, but whatever that is for you, it's kind of understanding how your intuition shows up. And then when you're in session with the client, honoring that. I can't tell you the
Mm-hmm.
number of times I have been in session with a client and either I get a word or a phrase in my head, like, and it's almost like an earworm. It's just on repeat. And I feel the sense that I am supposed to share this with the client. And so when that happens, I acknowledge it. And if, when the moment's right, I ask the client permission to share something. I'll say, I just had something kind of drop in. Would it be okay if I shared it with you?
Whoa.
And I've
Okay.
never had a client say no, but I still want to ask permission first. And inevitably, when I share it, it was something they needed to hear. Usually in that
Wow.
moment, usually
Okay.
it carried some meaning for them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not in the moment, but they would come back to it later. Or sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it simply kind of sparked a conversation that then led to whatever the insight was. But the moments that I have really trusted myself and shared what came up, um, it's never led me wrong. And in fact, it's the moments where I've doubted myself, where I haven't spoken up. I've turned the volume dial down on my intuition. The session ends and I feel like, I didn't really show up the way I wanted to. I'm not sure I really served my client as powerfully as I could have. So
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that when you ask permission and then share whatever intuitive hit that you've received, it will serve the client, typically
Yeah.
in the moment, but sometimes a little later, and that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very courageous approach to coaching because I think that we're so used to hearing about those leadership roles as putting emotion aside and being predominantly rational, right? And for the sake of having that client-centered approach, but there is so much value in bringing your own uniqueness and your emotion and that intuitive guidance into those interactions because we all are part of this collective consciousness. I believe I completely agree with you. I think about the fact that we all have an intuition, but we are so quick to turn it away because we think it's irrational or it doesn't make sense all the time. But I admire a lot that it's something that you are putting into practice because again, that co-creation, you're strengthening it by allowing it to manifest itself, but also you're coaching from a very, very authentic part of you. And we need more people being authentic as coaches because that's what drives and inspires people to do the same in their own life, as coaches or not.
I agree with you. And there can be a happy marriage between intuition, that inner knowing,
Mm-hmm.
and external data and knowledge. Like knowledge and
Mm-hmm.
knowing can go hand in hand. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's certainly a space for that in coaching. So it's not that we have to only go with our intuition and block out all sorts of external data points, but we also don't need to just follow what someone else is saying or showing us if our intuition isn't on board. Like there's a way to make space for both when we're leading, when we're taking action, and when we're making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To jump away from coaching a little bit,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, how do people start building that connection with their intuition? Like, what is something that has worked for you in the past?
Yes. So again, I think there's a little bit of experimentation that can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be fun in terms of figuring out the way your intuition likes to communicate with you. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it can start by thinking about moments in the past where you have known something, but you haven't known how you've known it, or you felt something, but it's like, wow, I just feel this in my gut, or I just have this sense. And so we pay attention to those moments. We pay attention to what happened leading up to them. And
Mm-hmm.
then we really get specific on, okay, what were you experiencing in that moment? I typically like to start with the body. I find it for most clients, not all, and I'll talk about that in a second, but for most clients, it's helpful to ask them where in their body they're experiencing a sensation. So if they're like, I just feel like I know this, I'll be like, okay, where in your body do you know this? For some clients, it's like just a sense in their gut. I had one client describe it almost like a lock and key right at their heart center.
Mm,
And so when we can help connect a physical bodily sensation with the intuition, then that can become our guide. And so then moving forward, we know, okay, do I have that lock and key sensation in my heart center? Do I have that gut sense? Because that can be the litmus test. Now, the
mm,
caveat to this that I kind of mentioned before is that for some people, connecting with their body doesn't feel like a safe thing to do. And this is
mhm,
especially the case for people who have histories of trauma. And so
mhm,
that's why, as coaches, we want to be trauma sensitive and we want to be really mindful of the experiences our clients may have had that we're not aware of. And so, again, asking permission is key. And so, before you do these types of body centered activities, we want to assess our clients' willingness and openness if they're available to it. And if it's not something that they want to do or they're not comfortable with, we got to pivot quickly, because coaching is not about forcing our clients to do things that they don't want
mhm,
to do or that they're not ready for. And so that's when maybe I might take more of a cerebral approach than a somatic approach
mm,
and start asking about thoughts versus bodily sensations.
I hadn't heard that pivot before. I think that's super important. And I love that you brought up the feeling of not feeling safe in your body, because that was what I was going to kind of point out. Is for me personally, when I started going through that process of tuning into my intuition after certain experiences this past year that made it get very loud until the point where I had to not ignore it anymore because it wasn't ignorable anymore. That jumping into the body can be very scary. And I find that a lot of reasons why we are quick to brush our intuition off is because we think that more often than not, it's going to lead to us having to make some crazy life change, or it's going to reveal some harsh, life changing truths, which that can happen. I'm not saying it won't, but the change scares us so much that we're like, no, I will stay where I am. I don't have to listen. But I've also learned that I will get loud if it has to.
Yes.
So for someone who is trying to do that slowly and to build that connection slowly, what advice would you give them?
Yes. There's so much in what you just shared too, because I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be hard to differentiate between intuition and fear. Actually, is
Mm,
this my intuition saying don't do this, or is this
yeah.
mind generated fear?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to suggest either that just because something's in the mind, it doesn't make it true or doesn't make it valid, but
Yeah.
it's all about understanding, well, where is this coming from? Because
Mm-hmm.
our minds just want us to be safe. That's at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the mind is here to keep us safe, and it's going to do what it has to do. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever we become more visible, whenever we put ourselves out there, we become more vulnerable. And vulnerability is not safe. And the mind
Yeah.
sees that and it's like, nope, we're not doing that. And so it's going to do whatever it has to, including bombarding us with all sorts of messages like, who do you think you are? You're not good at this. You shouldn't be doing this. No one's going to like you, whatever it is. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
mind trying to keep us safe. So when we understand that, when we understand the mind is doing its job, then we don't have to
Mm-hmm.
fight against those statements anymore. We can create space for them. We can actually express gratitude for our mind trying to keep us safe. And then we can ask, is this a message that is serving me right now? Is this a message that I need to hear? Because sometimes the answer is yes, this is not a safe time or a safe place for me to do this. And sometimes the answer is no, I need to take this step anyway. And that's when we can kind of bring our intuition in to help us discern where this thought is coming from. So
Mm-hmm.
I just want to share, like, this takes practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that we develop over time. And so I think it starts with, again, holding compassionate space for yourself. And especially if you're someone who maybe does not feel safe in your body, um, let's just start almost like getting to know your body again. what feels good? How can we treat the body with kindness and with compassion and with love? How can we build our own trusting relationship with our body?
Mm,
And sometimes that healing does belong in more of a therapeutic space. Sometimes it can be done with a trauma sensitive and trained coach, but it really is about creating that initial relationship. From there, we can then develop our
mm,
body awareness and then link it to our intuition in some of the ways that we talked about before.
Oh, that was brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is going to help so many people listening. And I I completely agree. I think that that idea that our brain and our nervous system are hardwired to keep us safe. And because they are using experiences from the past to make a judgment on and generalize to other situations, they're quick to react in ways that, we might not on a more conscious level do otherwise, right? And I think that that's also a mindset to shift into that allows you to be way more self-forgiving with yourself and realize that it's not necessarily you, it's just your body trying to keep you safe, and it's very sacred and worthy of loving for doing that. So I
Absolutely.
love that you bring up that perspective. Thank you.
Of
All right,
course.
so we're coming up to the end here, and the tradition on the Commitment to Growth podcast is that at the end of the episode, each guest gets a rapid fire round of 3 questions. The first two are the same for everybody, and the last one is unique to the person.
Okay.
So it's your turn.
Alrighty.
Are you ready? You feeling
I'm ready.
all righty? The first question is, what is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote, it's been ever since I was in high school. Actually, I think I saw it on the cover of like a Hallmark journal or something like that. But
Mm.
it's just Dante saying, "Oh, the experience of this sweet life." And I think just in that
Oh.
small quote, like, life is sweet, but like some of
Mm.
those experiences may be a little bittersweet, and yet we need them all in order
Mhm.
to really create depth in our life. So, oh, the experience of this sweet life is the quote that I just hold on to.
Mm-hmm. Is that Dante from the Divine Comedy or Dante's
Yeah.
Inferno? Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, that's all about intuition. That's so
Yes, it
fitting.
is.
If
I didn't know
anybody
that when I
listening
was
hasn't read it, it's an
I
incredible
I
book.
know it's funny to me that like I think I was 15 or 16 when that quote found me, and it's just stayed with me all
Yeah.
these years. And you're exactly right. It's all
Yeah,
connected.
totally. And you're coaching people on getting in tune with their intuition. So that's so cool. Oh, I love that was an aha moment right there. Love that. All right. The second question is, what song is currently stuck in your head?
Okay, wow. So, yeah, my very favorite musician is a woman named Tori Amos. And she has a song for whatever reason. And this song's, gosh, I can't even believe it's like 20 years old almost, but it's called A Sort of Fairy Tale. And that's the song that's stuck in my head right now, A Sort of Fairy Tale by Tori
Sort of
Amos. It's this lovely, bittersweet song about being on a relationship journey with someone and it's coming to an end.
hmm,
Really beautiful, really, really just gets you in the feels.
gets you in the feels. Okay, I'll have to listen to it. I don't think I've ever heard that before. That's so cool. Thank you. All right, the third and last question, which is unique
Okay.
to you, is Lee, you're a coach. You coach other
Mhm.
people. Who is your coach?
Who's not my coach? I think almost might be the
Mm.
better question because
Oh, I love
while I
that.
do while I do work with several fantastic coaches that I love, Megan Hale, Helen Henley. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, my life is so much better because those women are in it. I think on some level, everyone and everything can be a coach for us because every
Mm.
experience is an opportunity for us to learn more about ourselves and how we want to show up in the world. Even the experiences maybe we wish we weren't having, those can be a
Hmm.
mirror. It can reflect much more about ourselves than maybe we initially think. So
Hmm.
while I do have some amazing coaches in my life, I mean, I almost feel like my children are my coaches. My
Mm.
partner is my coach. You, in many ways, today in this
Oh,
conversation. I mean,
thank
I've
you.
definitely had some aha moments. So I really think when given the opportunity, anyone can be a coach for us. And I really believe too that anyone can coach. Sure, there are some skills and tools and things that you want to learn and practice, but I do believe everyone has the capacity if they have the interest.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer so much. And I that's definitely a mindset that I want to shift into now. Is I'm just gonna be walking down the street looking at everybody like they're my coach too.
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, your wisdom, your intuitive guidance with us today. That was stunning. I cannot wait for people to hear this. But before that, where can people find you after this episode?
Yes, this has been such a joyful conversation. I have
Right.
just enjoyed it so much. I can't believe that we're coming up to the end
I
already.
know.
But there is something about having powerful conversations that I think is just really inspiring. And so if people
Mhm.
would like to continue the conversation with me, you can do so over at coachwithclarity.com. That's my website where you can learn more about my podcast, my book, everything that we've got going on over there. And then I'm also on Instagram and TikTok at Coach with Clarity.
Oh, amazing. Oh, I'll have to follow you on TikTok. I haven't seen you on there yet.
It's
That's
been a while. I've taken a little break, but
oh,
I'll be
that's so
heading back
fair.
soon.
That's so fair. I'm also still trying to figure out the transitions and everything, so I'm right there with
Yeah,
you, but we'll figure it out together.
I
So,
like that.
yeah, Lee, thank you so much again. And I you're fantastic. You're such a superwoman. I cannot wait for people to hear this conversation, and we will be in touch in the future.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for tuning into this episode of the show, everyone. I hope you took as many gems away as I did, and I hope that you are feeling as inspired to lead as I was after this conversation. Lee is so stunning and just such a role model for so many of us in the world of coaching and leadership, and she's truly, truly doing amazing work that I hope you will continue to follow and use as a reference point. So, if you enjoyed that, make sure to subscribe to the show for further podcast episodes to be in tune with everything else that is dropping in the future. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Commitment to Growth Podcast to get all the updates on new and upcoming episodes, what guests are coming on, what cool things are happening on the show. Remember to check out the podcast's large official holistic platform at Commit to Growth, which is the dual personal training and podcast platform sandwiched together to help bring you fitness and personal growth information for you to help sustain and manifest a holistic lifestyle. And if you want to be a guest on the show, if you have any comments about the show, anything that you would want to hear more on here, you can email me. It's commitmenttogrowthpod@gmail.com, or feel free to DM me directly on Instagram. I'm always checking it. I'm always super, super happy to have any conversations on there. And make sure to check out all of Lee's resources. Check out her website. They are linked in the show notes as mentioned previously. And without further ado, thank you again for being here. Thank you for coming this week, and I will see you in the next episode.